Are you caught in the whirlwind of overwhelming responsibilities? And does the very thought of Monday morning send chills down your spine? Well, it's time to toss those feelings out the window. Welcome to Season 3 of the Take Notes podcast, where you get to make yourself the priority in order to show up as your best self. I'm your host, Jen Rafferty, former music teacher, emotional intelligence practitioner, mom of 2, and founder of Empowered Educator, and I've been where you are. In this season, we're not just talking about surviving, we are diving deep into thriving. Are you ready to take the lead in your life? Well, let's do this. Hello, and welcome back to another fabulous episode of Take Notes. Today, I am here with Dr. Teresa Peterson, who is the Director of Learning and Development for Sarah Noll Wilson Inc., and is passionate about applying best practices for learning to make professional development experiences meaningful, engaging, and accessible for all types of learners. Teresa holds a doctorate in education from the University of Northern Iowa and brings over 20 years of experience teaching, facilitating, and leading. She holds a conflict resolution certificate from Cornell University, which is right down the road from me, by the way, and is trained in immunity to change coaching and holds a certification in appreciative inquiry. Clients love Teresa's grounded energy, depth of thought, and ability to listen deeply. And I'm so excited to wrap today with you on the show. Thank you so much, Teresa, for being here.
Thanks. It's a pleasure for all the educators listening. I've got a freshly sharpened Ticonderoga ready to go. So don't worry, I won't be sharpening my pencil during the podcast.
Yeah. Is it number 2?
Oh, you got it. I'm ready to roll.
Very good. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you, especially because I have just spoken with Sarah. I know listeners, if you remember Sarah's conversation with me just a few episodes ago, Teresa is a part of Sarah's team, and I was just really excited to dive deep into some of the things that you have to share with your expertise. And one of the things we spoke about even before we just press record was creating safety around using your voice. Now, this speaks to me in a really deep way, particularly because I was a music teacher for most of my career, quite literally teaching people to feel empowered and inspired to use their voice. And yet, the more that I continue on my own personal growth journey, the more I uncover and realize that although it might have seemed like I was using my voice, there were so many places and spaces where I still felt like I was censoring myself and not being able to share my authentic truth. Can we start first by talking about where do these stories come from about why we believe we're not actually able to use our voice the way we want to?
Yeah, that's such a juicy question. And I'm also curious what's coming up for people who are listening along with us. I think it would be a mistake not to start with. Honestly, some of us grew up with messages that our voice wasn't important, that we should be silent, that we should defer. I think there are lots of messages about whose voice matters, whose voice is allowed to be the loudest, what that would look like and be okay for one person would not look like and be okay for another person. I think we see a lot of dynamics, and I want to step into this for a moment of, as we think about safe spaces for voice, we have to think about what that looks like for everyone and acknowledging that there are folks who have been silenced, not by choice, choosing to be silent, but have been silenced for a really long time. I'm thinking about people who don't identify as the dominant group, and I'm using quotes here. I work in a lot of leadership spaces where it is still very comfortable. Certain folks, largely white men, they appear to have no issue with safe spaces for their voices about any number of issues. And I see other people censoring by choice sometimes for survival because the risk might be too high, because the reward might not be there at all to use your voice. I think there are a lot of layers there that we could explore related to voice and power. So that's a lot of directions, right? Something that I heard recently, and I wanted to make sure I got the author right. I was listening to Dr. Lindsay Gibson, and she shared something I thought was so interesting, and it just cut to the heart of me related to safety and voice. And she said, because people often fixate on having the right words. So one of the stories we tell ourselves is if I can get the words right, then the other person will listen. And common misunderstanding about how people will be heard. And what she said was, if someone really wants to hear what you have to say, the exact words you use won't matter, that their mind and their heart and their ears are open and that you can navigate from there. You can check for understanding. You can reword things. You can say, actually, I meant a little bit more of this. You can ask questions. And the flip side, if someone doesn't care what you have to say, the words you choose won't matter, which I think is so juicy because sometimes when I'm working with folks, they're just fretting over how do I unlock the right set of, it's like an escape room or something. It's like, how do I decipher the special code that will make this person listen? And I think that's where safe spaces are really tricky because it's mutual. It has to be two-way. It has to be engaged by everyone in there. It's a gift that you give to one another. I could go so many directions with it. And my brain's just like fireworks percolating right now. Jen, what comes up for you when you hear, especially that idea, like if someone wants to hear words don't matter, we know they do, but there's more grace in the words, right? Or that we can take time to find the words that really fit the situation. And if I don't care, too bad, so sad kind of a thing. What comes up for you when you think about that?
Yeah, I appreciate the question because I wrote a whole bunch of things down which we can come back to. But I wish I knew that several years ago. I will share a personal example of this. Things were a little tenuous in my marriage even. And I remember sitting at a diner in New Jersey with one of my best friends. And literally those words that you just said, to find the right words to communicate this thing, this feeling, this problem I was having, this issue that I needed to bring up. And she actually said to me, Jen, there are no right words. And of course, I didn't believe her. And so my question to you is, can you speak on some of those subconscious censorship spaces that we go into when we start to have that inner dialogue of, I need to find the right words, my voice isn't going to be heard, I don't want to make somebody else, especially somebody that I care about or somebody that I work with or somebody that I love, I don't want to make them mad or upset. Where did those stories come from and why are they so pervasive?
I think let's start with, I have two kind of avenues in my mind. And one is, as folks are listening, I like it when people take time to consider their words they're going to choose, especially if stakes are high. So I'm not saying, just go for it on every interaction. Because fun fact, the Gottman Institute, the foremost researchers on relationships, right? The first 3 minutes of a conversation largely determine the success of the conversation. For folks listening, instead of trying to plan or think about everything you want to say for the duration of a conversation, if you want to think ahead about how you'll be invitational or how you'll be honest with yourself, gear your attention and your energy toward what's the kickoff? What are those first 3 minutes? How do I need to show up? I'm an advocate of thinking about what words you want to say in a thoughtful way, in a way of reflection and planning, not rumination. And I think that we start silencing ourselves when we're in that rumination phase. Legitimately, we know there are conversations with very high stakes. We know there are conversations where there could be consequences, right? And again, you can be really thoughtful about how you'll communicate or choose to step away because sometimes the time isn't right. But the things I see most often with folks are they know what they want to communicate, but for some reason they think that isn't okay to say. Either it's too direct, they're not comfortable expressing a need, right? Either because a lot of this goes back to like how we've grown up, how we've been nurtured in society, either that asking for help might be a weakness or that stating a need would mean you're selfish, right? And so there are a lot of assumptions that we make where we're doing that calculation to silence ourselves. Some that have come up for me many times would be the assumption I make is I don't think anything will change, so I won't bother. So I just silence myself about something. So something that I would encourage people to think about when you find yourself, when you pause and if I could just say what I wanted to say, like that little voice. And for me, it shows up, this is not a technical term. This is a Teresa term. what's my little micro thought? What's the thought that I had before the assumptions started coming up, before I started censoring, ruminating, questioning myself? Am I sure? Was that all that stuff? What was my first thought? And then, as much as folks can, and this is connected to the work of Immunity to Change, which I absolutely love, but what are the assumptions that underpin those behaviors, right? And those can be real juicy, but a lot of it is a leader would never ask for help. A leader would never admit they don't know, so they would censor. I would never ask for time for myself. This is one I've wrestled with, right? What are you, selfish? I thought you were helpful, right? And so there's usually some layers of assumptions of society that you don't even know is in there sometimes, right? You have picked it up so subtly over your upbringing. Different workplaces certainly have different rules about, am I allowed to spitball an idea? One of the things I cherish about Sarah is I can say, I don't have the words right on this one, but this is where I'm at. And then because she wants to hear, we can negotiate and navigate. And I can be like, actually, it's more this than this. We joke sometimes that it's like going to the eye doctor. Better one, better two, right? And you can get close to the idea together, which is beautiful. So there's a lot in there that we have to untangle. There's no one size kind of fits all way to think about your censoring, but there are definite connections there too. Assumptions, different beliefs you're holding. Again, the way you've been reared in society, the expectations of your workplace, which I also want to name for folks, can be really painful. If you're coming from a team where you've been heard, that's been very comfortable, you had a manager or a leader or principal who was very genuinely interested in lots of voices and you don't, it is just like slamming a door in your face emotionally. The breakdown is very hard. And then the flip side is if you've never seen it, it's very off-putting, or maybe not off-putting, but your guard is up and you're like, why are they asking for my opinion? Or I'm not even sure how to engage with this. And sometimes that's what we see when we're working with teams is a very high-functioning team that would have lots of safe space for voice where people have to censor themselves very little or certainly much less. Sometimes they welcome new team members who aren't coming from those environments, and there's a trust disconnect because they feel like, why can't they see how we do things here? And this person's like, when is the punishment coming for saying what you really think, right? And we've seen the reverse where, clearly a culture very functional and someone who's used to that comes in and they get gobbled up. And sometimes, unfortunately, they've been hired with the expectation of changing, oh yes, single-handedly change this culture with all these good teachings you're bringing in, right? Just a big buzzer on that one.
Yeah. Well, it's so interesting because it's coming up for me too, is we're specifically talking about teams of adults right now.
Yeah.
But there are so many levels and layers to this in a school situation because the way that we operate as adults in these teams and these ecosystems between our teachers, our TAs, the office staff, the principals, the superintendents, there are all these little microcosms that exist in the classroom that reflect the culture of what's happening in that greater ecosystem. Yeah. It's funny for me, my kids, my own personal children, I allow them space to use their voice. And what's so interesting is that my partner has actually shared with me, Jen, there's a lot of talking back and saying no. And so what's been so beautiful is that we've been able to have this conversation of why is this something that you're choosing to allow? And then for me asking her, why is this so triggering for you?
Yeah.
And what we both came to was that we both felt like we couldn't really express ourselves when we were kids. But for me, my choice with my children is to then allow for more of that, which causes a little bit of a different dynamic, which is sometimes really annoying and frustrating for me.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
However, I'm encouraging them to use their voice. So if they're going to ask me why, and it was for her, it was like, this is just how it is because this is how I was brought up and this is how it's supposed to be. Because we're both very much in this work, we've been able to have these beautiful conversations. That's so interesting that here is this situation and this is the reason why I've made these choices. This is the reason why I'm responding this way. This is the reason why you're responding this way. Because even in those little family units, they are reflective of how comfortable you are
Yes.
as the adult in using your voice. So fascinating to see the levels and layers of all of this play out, but particularly in a situation like a school
Yes.
when we're rearing all of these children together.
Yes. And something that Sarah and I were working with a group, and we received a real gift from someone who was mentoring us, guiding us along, Amanda Troston Bloom. So I'll give her a shout out. So I like to give credit where it's due. And one thing she had told us was, as consultants or as outsiders, we experience the issues, the rubs in the culture, the same way the people who work there full time do, and that we can shine a light on that. And as you were talking, and I was thinking about those dynamics of not only a school, but then the classroom, I was thinking in my time in public school, the children, the students, whatever age, 100% experienced the culture of the school, that classroom fully represented. How much voice would be tolerated, how much flexibility would be tolerated, right? I felt like I saw that a lot in terms of not the everyday nuts and bolts of like where we're going to keep the pencils, but what kind of an environment can be grown, can be nurtured, can be cultivated. And I'm going back to this beautiful point you made with you and your partner, and you have to untangle, where did this come from? And so I'm going to lean back into this work of immunity to change. Part of changing behavior is untangling the hold that those assumptions or those beliefs that you have that are so strong that you don't really realize you're holding on to until you're like, I think I know why this is coming up, right? And that the only way that very few people can just say, aha, that's it, and flip a switch and now they're behaving differently, but that we untangle it. And that one way we untangle that is through experiments, right? And so I'm thinking of you with your kids or me with my kids, where I might think, what would happen if I allowed a no? And instead I said, yes, I said, say more about that. Or I've noticed there's a pattern here with the dishwasher. So that's an essential part, I think, of when people are, again, I want to own that there are people who have been silenced and continue to be silenced, who have been marginalized, right? And like that is different. But when we're thinking about folks who maybe aren't fully utilizing their voice, that's kind of where I'm at over here. So things within our control, but we have to start untangling with experiments like, what would happen if I just tolerated that discussion for a minute? And I'm using tolerated with love because when we're talking about changing deep-rooted behaviors, it's not like, what a joy. I'm going to try to do something different. Can I even just tolerate having a moment of doing this differently, right? Some other ways you can experiment, a very safe way, just like you and your partner, stopping to think, what's the origin story of this for me? Where did this come up? I know what it was. I felt like this growing up, and now I want to try this, right? Or vice versa. Or spotting it in action is a very powerful. So if you're in the moment and you feel like I'm choosing to hang back, I'm choosing to stay silent, or I'm really kind of ruminating on the words I'm going to use. And again, not reflecting on them to make sure they're really what's inside, but ruminating for the sake of pleasing the other person with the words you're going to use. Where is that coming from? So even spotting it in action is a very powerful, like call your brain's attention to, I'm doing it right now, or I did it at the PTO meeting, or fill in the blank, whatever. I love this work of immunity to change because if you have this tangled kind of knot, where do you start pulling? Another beautiful way to describe it is you've got a foot on the gas of wanting to use your voice, and you've got a foot on the brake telling you no. And so like you have to figure out, where is this foot on the brake coming from?
Yeah. And I love this idea, which aligns so much with the work that I do with Empowered Educator, is exploring these places with beautiful curiosity. I use the words like, let's just experiment.
Yeah.
And this isn't about hating on yourself because you did it again.
Right.
This is like, that's so interesting. I did it again.
Yeah.
What was happening with me at that moment? What was I thinking? What was I feeling that led to that choice?
Yeah.
And once we start exploring that space with curiosity, that's really when some of these really cool answers come up and come through, so that then we can make new decisions.
I love everything about that. And you're right. For me, it should never be focused on shame. It is only curiosity. And when we think about the brain, we need the most sophisticated parts of our brain plugged in to get underneath of this stuff, to do a little house cleaning, to open some of the doors in our brain we don't really feel like opening. And that has to come from that place of love. As you were describing it too, I loved it, Jen. It made me think of when you've got a kid in your class and things haven't been right and you're just observing. You're just observing. Is it every time I turn my back to the board? Is it every time there's a transition, right? Classic example. Or like, is it every time there's an announcement, things get thrown up, right? So apply the same kind of loving observation that you would to a child or teenager, whatever age. I say child for like anyone who's under 25 right now, I feel like, so I don't know. But to any young person in your care that you would use that with on yourself, right? Because I think educators do such a beautiful job of so often looking to identify the problem so they can help solve the problem and separating the child from the problem. And I would like to invite them to apply that same logic to themselves and that you are a human. And before we started recording, we talked about how intertwined that can be, but like you're a human, separate all of your behaviors from the essence of you as a person, right? These can be untangled and played with.
Yeah, we're working with our own neurobiology.
Yeah.
And that's really what this is.
Yeah.
This isn't you. This is your brain. This is your wiring.
Yes.
This is how things have developed. And what's so beautiful about neuroplasticity is that you can change. And so you're not broken. There's nothing wrong with you. You don't need to be fixed. What we have is this beautiful opportunity for you to be this non-judgmental observer of yourself and ask yourself some questions. Is this behavior actually serving me?
Yes.
Is me staying quiet serving me?
Yeah.
Is this representing my highest, best version of my most authentic self?
Yes.
And the answer is no, then you have choices.
Right.
And this is really the crux of what we're talking about here.
Yeah. No, I love everything about it. And I think I don't want folks to lose sight of beyond how good it can feel when you work on that stuff for you. The ripple of that is enormous, whether it's in your home, with your colleagues, with the students in your care, advocating at the legislature, right? Any number of things you might be wanting to do anytime soon. It's so transferable and the ripple is huge.
Yeah. And so I would be remiss if I didn't now talk about that second prong that you mentioned at the beginning of our conversation about voice and power.
Yeah.
Because while we've been talking about this other place for a little while, I think it's important that we include this as part of our conversation today too. So can you speak on that piece of how we feel about using our voice when power comes into play? And let's be honest, there's power play everywhere we go. So tell us a little bit about how that goes and what we can do to navigate that.
That's such a great point. Gosh, this is something I could chew on for a while. Let me ask just a clarifying question too. Are you thinking power and voice through the lens of teams I serve that are not very diverse? And I'm thinking about teams that are very diverse. Like we can talk about it through that lens. And we could also talk about speaking truth to power kind of angle. Like what is coming up for you when you think about?
Yeah, I guess truth to power for me, I don't know. I guess I don't understand the difference.
Okay.
For me, I'm thinking about like that. Yeah. So if we're talking about voice and power, there are so many different colors and nuance to that. But speaking to power, regardless of a hierarchy in a workforce or diverse dynamic, I imagine they're similar.
There's a lot of overlap there. The first thing that's coming up for me is, again, especially when there is a position of formal power and authority, that person is responsible for the tone that is set. That person is responsible for whether voice can be heard or whether voice will be silenced. And I think for too long, and let's be very honest, for folks who are watching or can only hear me, I'm a Midwest, white, cisgender, heterosexual woman, right? I don't know that I am the best spokesperson for this topic based on my lived experience, but I have certainly observed this. And I'm certainly learning a lot from those around me. So what's coming up for me is it is the leader's responsibility. For far too long, the expectation has been placed on the folks who have been silenced. And I think we often say historically, but let's be honest, currently, lots of folks are actively being silenced every day, that the onus has been on them to like, you just need to do XYZ. The problem is where the power is. So if you are a person in a position of power, you need to be asking yourself, whose voices am I comfortable hearing? And whose voices have I been less comfortable hearing? And let's get real honest about that. Who is allowed to say anything they want to me and who is not, right? What are the rewards and what are the punishments? I see this play out a lot in teams where the leader will say, anyone can say anything to me at any time. And then their favorite person says XYZ and they're like, that's why John's amazing. And then someone else will say something that appears even less confrontational or like less controversial, right? Less provocative. And what I heard that so beautifully summed this up on a team once was, there are people who can say anything to the leader and it's fine. And there are folks who can say almost nothing. If you say one thing, you'll get a line through your name instead of under it. You're done. And that is not that person's responsibility to fix, right? And so I want to give lots of loving pushes that if you are a person in a position of power and authority, even if you are the person with informal power, like who gets to use the microwave first in the break room, you need to interrogate yourself about voice and who is speaking or how even people are speaking. That's something else that I feel super passionate about from a neurodiverse standpoint is voice is not just what is spoken. This can be what is written. This can be however folks want to communicate. This can be synchronous. It can be asynchronous. So even rethinking what we mean by voice or input, right? Because I've served many teams who I don't do my best thinking on the fly. And I've served many teams where, the window for comments will be open for the next 2 minutes and then it's closed forever. Well, my brain's just getting warmed up within 2 minutes. So I think as workplaces continue to be incredibly and beautifully more inclusive and diverse, we have to think about how we allow voice to happen and what we really consider to be voice. And it doesn't have to be spoken, but it certainly could be. I know that's one watch out, and I'll give credit to my colleague, Jolnata Villanova Mitchell. I love writing. That's how I best communicate. And she has helped me think about other ways to have voice present and has pushed on me a little bit about reliance on the written word being a bit of a tie to like a white supremacist hierarchy tool that I was not aware of. For me, that's just how my brain works best. And it's pushed me to think about what can voice look like and what can voice look like when someone is ready to share verbally spoken and I'm just not ready to respond. And I think this goes back to a little bit of where we started. That if someone really wants to hear, the method, the words, the time is far less important than the journey of getting to understanding versus if I don't really care. I'm back to if you are the person in a position of power authority, who around you can help hold that mirror up for what type of voice is allowed? Who can say it? What's tolerated? Who is rewarded? Who is punished? Who is being typecast? That's a great conversation I had this week with someone. I get fired up about it, Jen, and all of our friends listening. I get real fired up about it.
I can see, and I love it when you get fired up about the things that bring you joy. It makes for such a rich conversation. And I hear that a lot too. I hear folks who have shared with me, I've been told so many times that I'm just being too dramatic.
Yes.
I'm overly sensitive. I shouldn't care as much.
Oh.
Or I'm being a huge bitch. Like that comes up a lot too. And those roles then we are pushed into. And so my question to you, I think you addressed it a little bit in that last piece that you said about who on your team can hold up the mirror for you.
Mm-hmm.
Because the truth is, while we can all attempt to hold up a mirror for ourselves, everybody has blind spots.
Yep.
We just do.
Yeah.
That's how it works. And nobody is immune to that.
Yeah.
And so dropping your ego enough to ask for help in this is essential to leading a really effective team and space where people feel comfortable
Yeah.
to share, to use their voice in however they need to. Can you just share maybe one example of how that conversation can go in asking for help and understanding one's blind spots?
Yes. So I love the idea of a loving critic, right? That's a term that we hear often. But this is the specific part I want to encourage people. Don't go in with a vague ask about some vague time period. Get really focused. I'm working on getting better at, maybe it's making sure every voice is heard in a meeting. We'll just use that as our example. I'm working on getting better at making sure everyone's voice is heard in the meeting. During the meeting on Tuesday, will you keep track of who's speaking up, who needs an invitation, who I deferred to, who I gave 2 opportunities before anyone else had 1 invitation to speak? Get very micro with what you want people to observe for. And the other thing I'll say, think about truly how, if you're committed to growing, the process has to work for you. So think about how you want to receive that feedback from the person. I'm a person who likes to take things in and chew on it. Most of the time, an instantaneous debrief would not be my preferred method. I'd be like, can I see what you wrote down? Or tell me and let me noodle on it and let's talk tomorrow. Other people would be like, let's get in here. Just like some kind of on the sideline situation. I did this 3 times. I didn't ask Maria 1 time, etc. Get very micro in the ask. A beautiful example of this, I don't know if Sarah told this story. This is from work she did with someone she was coaching, a very senior leader in an organization who got very rough feedback that there was a gender difference, that he was favoring the men on the team and minimizing the women on the team. And there was a lot of data. And the first thing he did was own it. He said, I didn't realize I was doing it. I'm not intentionally doing it, but clearly I'm doing it and I'm committed to getting better at. And so he went in also with a list of, so this is what I'm going to start with. I'm not going to ask women to take notes during the meeting. So he went in with some ideas he had and then said, if you catch this, this is how I want you to bring it to me. And it wasn't a power play, like, this is how I want you to bring it to me. It was like, for me to be really open, come up to me right afterwards. Because for some people, that is the preference. For me, it would be like, plant a seed with me and let me reflect on it. And then I want to come back and have what for me would feel more fruitful. Be very micro in your ask. The vague plans, oh yeah, I'm going to learn how to read. Oh yeah, just put it out in the universe. That isn't how anything really happens. And when people bring it to your attention, reward it, recognize it. I misspoke last week and Jen followed up with me about it. Thank you, Jen. I didn't catch it at the time, so I want to give you a shout out. And then you're on to your agenda. It's that simple.
Yeah, and powerful. And that's some of the evidence that we get to see about creating safe space, because I've said this a lot on the podcast. We talk about safe spaces a lot.
Yeah.
It's not enough to just say it's a safe space or to put a sticker on the door and say it's safe space. What is the evidence here?
Yes.
And these tools that we've been uncovering over the past few conversations can be very powerful and actionable in not just sharing the value of the safe space, but having people receive it and engage in that safe space too. So I appreciate you sharing that. So I need to ask, based on this gorgeous conversation, I would love for you to answer the question I ask everybody on the podcast, which is, what is your dream for the future of education?
Now that gave me a little mist. I got a little misty. My dream for the future of education, quite simply, would be an absolutely best in class education for every child in the world. Not best relative to where they live, best period, right? That they have full tummies, that they have the medical care they need, that they see school as a place where they can be themselves, whatever that means, right? Where educators feel cherished, valued, like the actual gems in society that they are, right? People don't really understand what that role is. I don't think still. I can only dream about how magnificently the world would evolve if every child on the planet, and that it was of equal quality for everyone. That people didn't feel like they had to move to get something better. They weren't perpetuating cycles of less than education, right? That schools would be fully resourced by the government, that they would not have to have fun runs and donut fundraisers and all sorts of things to get the essential things they need to do their jobs well. And I think I'll close with just going back to that idea of that best in class, like a truly world-class education. Many years ago, I went to a Coalition of Essential Schools conference, and I don't believe that that organization exists anymore. But one of the things, they had wonderful principles, and many of your listeners might be familiar or enjoy that. But the one that has always stuck with me, and I think sticks with me as a parent, and that I can't help but, think about in this conversation, is that their goal for every child was that they would learn to use their mind well, right? And for me, that's like the whole thing, the arts, the sciences, the feelings, the movement, just like everything that is the essence of a human. That's my dream. There it is.
Yes, let's do it.
Yeah, right now. I'm ready. My bag's packed.
That really is, though, what we get to do here. And for those of you listening who continue to engage in the work of your own personal growth, your impact is directly related to your ability to grow in this way.
Yeah.
And we do get closer to our dreams every day when we engage like this. And the more we connect with people like you, Teresa, the more we can actually make this a reality for everyone. So before we go, can you share a little bit about how people can get in touch with you and the work that you do with Sarah?
Yeah, absolutely. The website is sarahnollwilson.com. You can find me on LinkedIn at Teresa Peterson EDD. You can also find me at Target, just whatever your local Target is. I'll probably be shopping there. Yeah, I'd love to connect anytime. And truly, if you're listening and you think, would you clarify this, or how could I apply it to this situation? Please reach out, because I'm here to help.
Yeah, it's great. And everyone on Sarah's team has just been phenomenal. It's been a real pleasure to talk with you and get to know you, Teresa. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you so much.
And for those of you listening, make sure you write a review. Go ahead and tell a friend about this episode, and we will see you next time on Take Notes.
Incredible, right? Together, we can revolutionize the face of education. It's all possible, and it's all here for you right now. Let's keep the conversation going at Empowered Educator Faculty Room on Facebook.